Let me show you what might be the very best option to get you started into the world of espresso. This is the new Flair Neo Flex, and what's really crazy about this espresso machine is that for $99 you can have a real espresso setup in your own home. Now on this channel you'll see me review all kinds of coffee gear, and a lot of it costs hundreds or even thousands of dollars. But what gets me the most excited are products like this one. You're probably asking, why is that? If you get to review all this great coffee gear, why would you get excited about a $99 espresso maker? Let me tell you why. Because I started into the world of espresso at 1.2, and products like this make that barrier of entry lower. It makes it way easier to get into the world of espresso, and I just love that, and products like this one. And if you are considering jumping into that world of espresso, let me just say I think you're gonna love this review and this coffee maker, and I am here for you to make that jump easy and fun. Before we get started though, a quick disclaimer. Flair did hit me up a couple weeks before the launch of the Flex and gave me the heads up that it was coming and asked me if I wanted a unit to try. Now they did also send me a Flair 58 Plus, which is a super flashy manual coffee maker, and as fun as that coffee maker is, I'm actually a little bit more excited about this one. Now when Flair sent these units over, they didn't ask for anything in return. They just said, hey, we'd love for you to try these out. Let us know what you think. This review is in no way sponsored by Flair, and they're seeing it at the same time you are. Now, as always, my commitment on this channel is to you, and you're going to get my full unfiltered thoughts on the Neo Flex. Now, a while ago on this channel, I reviewed the predecessor to the Neo Flex, the Flair Neo. And what I loved about that coffee maker was the fact that it really lowered the bar price-wise to getting into the world of espresso. And this machine takes that even further. It costs $50 less. The Neo costs $150, and this comes in at $99. Fantastic. Now, when you open up the Neo Flex, you're gonna find a lot of little bits and parts inside, which can be a little bit confusing at first, but it does make for some really great options with this coffee maker. You're gonna have the frame, which consists of this part here and the base. They're separate when you get it open. Inside, you have this part called the espresso group, and inside that, you're gonna have the piston here. You get two portafilters, which is what you put the coffee into. This one's called a flow control, or others might call it a pressurized portafilter, and this one is a 2-in-1 bottomless or non-pressurized portafilter. You also get this cap for preheating the group. You also have this dosing cup / tamp, which you use to press the coffee down, as well as a dosing funnel, which makes it a little less messy. The shower screen right here, and a couple extra parts, as well as a quick start guide and this cute little card that says you're a home barista. Now that was sitting right on the top when I opened it, and it's just kind of cute. I liked it. So I'll show you how all this works in just a second, but I want to talk about these two portafilters first. This one, the pressurized one or flow control, and this one, the bottomless 2-in-1. Now a non-pressurized portafilter can make better espresso, but it also requires you to have a pretty expensive espresso burr coffee grinder, which really raises the cost of this setup. This one, the flow control or pressurized portafilter, is really neat because what happens in here is the portafilter itself provides that pressure, so you can get away with a much less expensive grinder. And I love that because it reduces the amount of money you need to spend to get started. Will the espresso be quite as good out of the flow control pressurized portafilter? Of course not, but it really is a nice option to get started on the cheap. And then when you're ready, you upgrade your grinder, and you have this to allow you to go a little bit further without having to upgrade all of your equipment. The original Neo also came with a pressurized portafilter, which I loved for the same reason, but getting a non-pressurized version was an upgrade, an add-on, which added to the price of $150. It was great that they offered that, but it did raise the cost. It's fantastic that Flair has just gone ahead and included both of these in the Neo Flex. And what's really neat about the 2-in-1 non-pressurized portafilter is it comes with this little attachment that pops out, so you can convert it to a full-on bottomless portafilter, or if you want to control that stream of coffee coming out in case things get a little messy, you just pop this in and it's nice and clean as well. Now, the best way to understand how this thing works is to actually see it in action. So why don't we make a coffee? Now with any manual espresso maker, the first thing you need to do is preheat it. And the reason for that is because if you don't, when you dump your hot water in, all that metal is going to suck out the temperature and drop it below what is optimal for making espresso. So the first thing we got to do is preheat our stuff. So I'm going to grab the group, get my kettle. All right, so I put the cap on the bottom of the group and I'm just going to fill this up, and this hot water will warm that up. So I've pre-weighed and ground up about 15 grams of espresso coffee here. That's what Flair recommends. And I used the fellow Ode grinder, which is a nice grinder, but it can't normally grind fine enough for espresso. So this is gonna be a great test for the pressurized portafilter. Now, if you don't wanna use a scale, you absolutely don't need to. Flair says 15 grams, but they say that's about 3 tablespoons depending on your coffee. So I've got that amount, and I'm just gonna grab my dosing ring here so I don't make a mess and put it onto my pressurized portafilter, and I'm just going to dump it in, and I'm just going to give a very light tamp. Now that grind, that is way too coarse for what I would normally do for espresso. We're going to see how it tastes. What we also do is we put on this little shower screen here that evens the flow of water as it goes over the coffee beans. I'm going to put my scale under here. Again, you don't need to use that. I'm just going to empty out my preheat water. Okay, I'll take the cap off, and I'll put the group, it's called, on here, and I'm going to fill the chamber. I'm gonna put the plunger in, and I'm going to press down on the espresso. All right, let's see how this tastes. That is really good. Okay, so that is shockingly a good espresso shot. Now, I've also used the bottomless non-pressurized filter with a really nice espresso grinder, and you get into that really good top tier, like you can't barely even believe that you're making it with this machine, quality of espresso. And that's what I love about this machine and about the Neo before it. The thing is ridiculously cheap. Like, it's $100. And for you to be able to make coffee that rivals a setup that costs thousands of dollars, sure, that setup may be a little more convenient and it may get to a higher bar of quality eventually, but honestly, to get started, this is a fantastic setup. And I think by this point, the advantages of the Neo Flex are pretty self-evident. Let's talk about where this machine may be lacking. Number one, obviously, this whole thing is plastic. So that gives a certain vibe. In fact, when I showed a couple friends my box, because I was excited to share, they kind of said, that looks a little bit like a kid's toy from TJ Maxx or whatever. And I kind of get that, but also the thing is so cheap. It's kind of part and parcel for what you would expect. It might creak a little bit when you're using it, and it's not flimsy, but it definitely doesn't have the same vibe that the metal Flairs have. Now, one nice thing that Flair has added here is they've added this kind of front leg, this extra support, which really makes the whole unit a lot more stable to counteract a little bit of sacrifice on strength from switching from metal to plastic. Also, in the plunger, Flair has put in this little silver fail-safe valve. What's nice about that is as you are pressing down on the flex, if for whatever reason you've ground too fine or done something wrong, you're not gonna break your machine by putting too much pressure on it. Now, that's handy, but once you break it, you know, you gotta pull it out and get a different seal here. Unfortunately, Flair sends you an extra, but there is only one extra. So if it's feeling like you're putting way too much pressure on and nothing is coming out, you might just wanna back off and try again. One thing that I've always kind of found to be a negative with Flairs is, as you can see, there's like a lot of little bits. So the workflow is kind of a little complicated. Now, with anything, once you get used to it, it's not really a big deal, but it certainly can be a little intimidating if you're just getting started, because you know, you got to keep track and, oh, did you do everything in the right order? And did you put all the pieces in that you were supposed to? And then you got to clean them all up after and dry them all. So that is definitely something to consider in terms of overall workflow. But again, for the low price, you're not really going to find too many other options. One thing that I have seen a little bit already is that the Flair Neo Flex is not compatible with Flair's pressure gauge upgrade kit. Now let me show you why. Well, I'll let you make up your own mind about that. One thing I can tell you is that Flair at least says it's not compatible with the Neo Flex, and I think the reason for that is right here, this fail-safe seal. That pressure gauge does not have this seal. So if you are using it and you put too much pressure on it, there's nowhere for that pressure to go, and you're at a lot greater likelihood of either breaking your flex or hurting yourself. Not recommended by Flair, but judge for yourself. Obviously, this isn't an electric machine, so if you're into milk drinks, you're gonna need to figure out another solution for that. And cleanup, while not terrible, isn't the most smooth process either. Also, when people talk about Flairs, they really talk about them as portable machines, and I don't really agree with that. I mean, look at this. It's definitely not the type of thing you can toss in a laptop bag. Well, I guess you could, but it's definitely not the type of thing you would normally toss in a laptop bag and take with you. Could you technically take it in a car and take it to your place of work? Sure, but there are a lot more portable espresso makers if you want to make portable espresso. Things like the Pico Presso or the Nano Presso, depending on your budget. So I don't really see this as a portable coffee maker, but some of those other espresso makers like the Pico cost a lot more than this too. So I think the factor here is the price. But I have to say, for all those cons, who really cares? This thing costs $100 and there's nothing that is touching its price. As Flair as a company has grown, they have enabled thousands of people to cheaply and easily enter into the world of espresso. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a great thing. Is this plastic? Sure. Does it make real espresso? Maybe some elitists are gonna argue that, but I'm gonna say definitely it does. Especially once you get into using that bottomless 2-in-1 portafilter with an espresso burr grinder. The Neo Flex is an outstanding way to get started into the world of espresso for $100. Is this gonna be your espresso maker for your next 10 years? Probably not, but again, who cares? It costs $99. If you want to give this hobby a spin, get this espresso maker and try it out. If it sticks, you can upgrade it later without a lot lost. Now, if I didn't answer a question that you had about the Neo Flex, make sure you drop it into the comments. And I would also love for you to subscribe to my channel. I love helping people on their coffee journey, and I would love to be able to see you again. If you have a video idea that you want to see from me, make sure you drop it in there as well. And until next time, cheers.